Hello, I'm Emma Desi, and welcome to another episode of Turning Readers into Writers. If you're brand new here, welcome, and here's what you need to know. This is a community that believes you are never too old to write your first novel. No matter what you've been up to until now, if you're ready to write your book, I'm ready to help you reach the end. I focus on helping you find the time and confidence to begin your writing journey, as well as the craft and skills you need to finish the book. Each week I interview debut authors, editors and industry experts to keep you motivated, inspired and educated on all things writing, editing and publishing. If you want to catch up, head on over to emmadesi.com where you'll find a wealth of information and tools to help you get started. Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Sam Thiara is a professional who has created a personal journey as a speaker, storyteller, writer, educator, mentor, coach, entrepreneur, problem solver, and community activator. His goal is to engage individuals in their personal and professional development, work with teams and organisations on alignment and the 45 plus non-profits that he has worked with over the years. Presently, he teaches at the BD School of Business at Simon Fraser University and is also the founder and chief motivating officer at Ignite the Dream Coaching and Consulting, a platform that engages his audience to define their path. He has authored 2 books, one on storytelling and the other a travel memoir about his journey to India to find his ancestral roots with nothing but a faded photograph. And he has also spoken at 2 different TEDx conferences. This is a great conversation, not only to learn about Sam's journey to writing and the telling of his memoir and what drove him to do that, but also his thoughts on leadership. Because as writers, as authors, yes, of fiction as well, we are leaders. Think about your favourite writers and how you respond to them. Do you listen to what they say? Do you trust what they say? If not all of it, perhaps some of it. But they certainly have an influence on you and you want to read their next books and you're interested in what they say. And so for us as authors who are building our back catalogue, building our readership, it's important that we understand that we are also leaders in our own small way. So if that's something that feels a little bit scary to you, this is really worth listening to. Or perhaps you're just on the cusp of that and you're noticing that people are turning to you and asking about your opinions on different subjects or interested to know about your books and what you think about the world, then this is a really, really great interview for you to get some confidence about that and know that you are in good company and that you have a voice. And if it comes from a good place and a true place, then you should share that voice. So let's find out more about Sam. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you for having me here today and, the opportunity to share and hopefully provide some insights.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. I'd love to just start off about your journey to writing specifically and your memoir. And you've also written a non-fiction book as well, I believe. So I'd love it if you could share that with us.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, if I look back about 8-9 years ago, I wasn't a writer. And it's something that emerged in my pathway after I spoke at my first TEDx, because then people were like, you have so much to share on storytelling. How can I tell stories? And you should write a book about it. And Emma, I, having this no experience piece with regards to, where do I even start writing a book? And, for me, what I do is I break things down. So the first book is a nonfiction book on personal storytelling. And I used it as an opportunity to share how people can tell stories. Well, when I sat down to write this book, I asked myself, I said, okay, if I was to read a book on storytelling, what would I want in the book? And then I said, well, there's maybe three parts. The first part is a base knowledge, like why tell stories, the importance of storytelling, and what is storytelling? So you establish a base. And I said, well, I want to tell my stories. So then I created a section where I could tell my stories based on my TEDx speech and those 5 key pieces that I needed for storytelling. And then I thought third part is, well, how do I get other people to write stories or tell stories based on everything I've shared now? So that was part 3. But the interesting part was, I was like, but there's so much more I want to share and to tell. And I blog, and I said, but where does the blogging fit in? And I was like, wait, this is my book. I'll just create a 4th section. And the 4th section was, here are some blog posts with insightful questions. Now that we've gone through 3rd section of, how to build stories for yourself, etc. Now apply it to these blog posts. And it was funny because it was more like, yeah, no, this is my book. I can do what I want. And I think that's one of the freedom that many authors need to realize. And Emma, I think one of the most important pieces for me, and I know there may be people who disagree with me on this, when I was trying to find the audience that I needed to write for, it was a struggle. I couldn't write. But when I started to write for myself of what I think this book should be, the words just flowed. And it locked in this first book. And then, after I wrote this book, there were 5 stories I embedded in there in the 2nd section about my stories. And the one of the stories was about my journey to India, which became my memoir for the 2nd book. But the journey of writing this first book, I'm glad it was the first book I wrote, because it provided me the base, the tools, and the knowledge that I needed to then move forward to tackle something as a even bigger project. And I think for your listeners, the idea is, I personally think that there's a lot of people who would like to write a book, or there's a book in them, they don't know where to begin. Or in my first book, one of the things I wrote in the very beginning is, there is fear in me in writing this book because of what people may think. The bigger fear is, what if I don't do this? And that's what really laid down the foundation, where I said, no, I have to do this, and I have to write and get this book out there. If 10 copies sell, well, at least that's something I've done.
Yeah, I think that is I think that's really important what you just said there about making that decision to do it, because not doing it was worse than people not liking it. And I think that is something that holds a lot of people back. I think about the writers that I come across, many of them don't even tell anybody that they're writing, because there's that fear that they'll be judged in some way, when quite often most people are in admiration of people who are writing. But
I do.
These things are so close to our hearts that people are so afraid of looking foolish, or that someone will think, who do you think you are doing this? But so it's so important that, to make that distinction, that this is a decision, that it's so important to me to do it. I don't care what anyone else says.
And the fact that, people say, but I'm not an expert. I said, no, if you put your words out there, you are an expert. And if I may share, this is something I wrote in my first book about storytelling. And this one came to me just at like 5 a.m. I got up and I just literally sat down, had to rework a little bit of it. But this is a poem I wrote that really reflects the essence of that first book I wrote on personal storytelling. And it's called Here to There. It took great time to write this book. Please turn the pages and have a look. A poet I'm not, a writer perhaps. The words I wrote are within your grasp. I wrote for me, I wrote for you. From a dream emerged something to do. Scattered about, my stories were a struggle. laying all about like a giant jigsaw puzzle, pulled from here, added to there. My life is before you, presented with care. Many have helped to make this true. I appreciated all who became the crew. Within us all, there are stories to be told. Times in our life, we are not feeling bold. We say to ourselves, who would care what I say? My ramblings and thoughts within my day. It is the world who needs to know you are here. To not share with others becomes my fear. Within you is greatness that I can see. Anything you want, take the time to be. I am here for you every step of the way. Time is precious, and while I plan to stay, I want you to know just how much I care. You are just one. I find you quite rare. And that was something that just emerged with all the thoughts of that I had put into this book, that I needed to just almost create like a poem, but I'm a poet I'm not.
That was lovely. That was beautiful. And a line that I sort of took out particularly was that who would care what I say? And I think that's one of the things that stops a lot of people, isn't it? But in fact, those tiny stories, and you talk about this in your TEDx talk, you know, it's the ordinary that is the extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that we live in a world that is ordinary, we've made it ordinary because of our routines, but embedded in the ordinary are these tremendously extraordinary experiences. But that's where I built the concept of carpe, like carpe diem, but carpe stands for curiosity, appreciation, reflection, perspectives, and experience. And that's what I go through to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. Curiosity is what stops us dead in our tracks when we start going with our minds quite open, and then appreciating things for more than what they are. And then adding purpose and meaning to it through reflection. And we all have perspectives, meaning we all have our own views that we then again layer into this recipe. But the key thing is capturing it as an experience, because if you don't capture it as an experience, your story will die an untimely death. And we all have so many tremendous stories, but you know, it's a need for us to share.
It is. And so I'm thrilled that you went on to write your second book, your memoir. You shared the experience there. So do tell me about that, because, you know, and we can see each other on a Zoom camera. I know that you're Indian, but you said that you went to India to find your heritage. So I'm curious to hear more about the story behind the story.
And that emerged out of the first book I wrote, because the journey to India was a component of that first book. And then I thought, no, I need to go into much more detail and depth on this. It's a beautiful story. So I was born in England, raised in Canada. My parents come from Fiji Islands, and my grandparents are from India, same with my ancestors. And as you mentioned, visibly, I look South Asian. And it's not uncommon for people to come to me and say, what part of India are you from? And I say, well, I was born in England, raised in Canada. And they're like, no, your parents, what part of India are they from? And I said, well, my parents come from Fiji Islands, which is near Australia. And then they say, wait, so are you Indian? And I'm like, well, my ancestors and my grandparents are from India. And others who will say, well, you're not Indian, you're Canadian. And, you know, and then the other one I always get, though, is after I explain all of this, then they say, no, really, where are you from? And I'm like, let's start with planet Earth first. So, I mean, I grew up in Vancouver. I moved to Canada when I was only 4 years old, moved to Vancouver, and, you know, my life was in Vancouver, and, you know, you're Canadian. And the idea, though, is my life was always segmented: Canadian, British, Fijian, Indian. And I just remember that whichever place I was in, if I was in school, I was Canadian. If I went to a temple, it was Indian. You know, if I was at a, you know, person's house, they, you know, relatives or whatnot, there is a bit of that Fijian that comes in. And I always felt that my identity was very segmented. And, you know, I was struggling with this. I always saw myself Canadian. And then the idea, though, is that you're in high school and, you know, you're a grade 8 student walking the hallway, and all of a sudden a grade 12 student just comes and hits you on the side of the head and knocks you to the ground. I was like, what's going on? And he said, well, I don't like Indians. And you're like, but I'm Canadian. And he said, no, you're not Canadian. it really threw in a flux of identity, because growing up, you're Canadian. I mean, here, I mean, we play hockey, we eat hot dogs, and when we scrape our knee, we bleed maple syrup. I mean, that's what I am. I'm a Canadian. But I think it was in university where I got into a much more global audience and experienced people from all parts of the world, but also a lot of people from India, Pakistan, and the region around there. And they were always sharing their cultural identity. But oftentimes I'd say, what part of India is your family background? And you always said, well, and then you'd explain it to them and they look at you a bit strange going, but you seem to be Indian. So that was lacking. I needed to go to India to realize that part of my life. But equally at the same time, my grandfather left India probably around 1905 and hopped on a steamer ship. The ship landed in Fiji, and that's where life became for our family. So we were quite separated or segmented away from our Indian heritage and cultural identity. So I was asking around, and part of me was, I think I need to make a trip to India to find my ancestral roots, because nobody knew where my grandfather's house was. He left it when he was 18 and never went back. And the information was very sparse. Well, the only thing I really had to go by was this faded photograph. It's about 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, dingy orange, it's old, with people in front of this house. And that's all I really had to go by, as well as the name of the village, the town it was supposed to be near, and the district. That's it. So it's like a needle in a haystack, but not knowing where the haystack was. And I always say I was a foreigner going to a land that shouldn't be foreign to me. That's the essence of this journey. Now, the identity piece. I remember I was going to go to the Golden Temple in Amritsar for a visit. And I just remember waking up at 4 a.m. and I had an epiphany. The fact is, I looked at my identity all wrong. I looked at my identity as a thali, in other words, a platter with segmented dishes. Mm-hmm. I was British, Canadian, Fijian, Indian. And well, I mean, I played for 11 years in an Irish military pipe band. So maybe there's a bit of Irish chutney mixed in there as well, but everything was always segmented. The epiphany I had is, you know what? I'm actually khichdi. And khichdi is this wonderful rice dish in India, which is a blend of flavors, blend of spices. That's my realization, was instead of segmenting my life, I'm going to embrace them all, and I'm going to blend it together, much like khichdi, what it is. For people in England, it might be like a bubble and squeak. In North America, it might be an omelet, but you just sort of blend everything together and it's a beautiful mix. So that was the identity piece that I managed to capture. The journey, though, was much more complicated, because there was the name of the village, the town it was close by, and the district. And we would ask a lot of people. I asked people in England who are from that district, or in Canada, and people would be like, well, I've never heard of the village name. I know the town, the district, but I don't know if you have the right name. Or there was a lot of noise. They were like, why are you even looking? Or if you find it, you're not going to get a good reception, because they're going to think you want to make a land claim because of your grandfather. And I was like, no, I just want to go see if I can find my grandfather's house. They said, no, but that's what they're going to think. And, you get all of this happening. Well, a day before I left, my step cousin contacted me and he said, look, I made it to the town, but I did not find the village, but the village name is something else. It's something else. And I was like, oh, so the name of our village is Chadodi. He said it's Janodi, but there was no Janodi, but 5-6 miles away from the town of Garshankar, which is the town we knew, was a place called Jandoli. So I asked my father, I said, Chadodi, Jandoli, what do you think? It's 6 miles away. And he said, do you know what? I think that may be it, because that's what I understood how far the village was from the town. So here I am. We found Jandoli. I arrive, we have sweets in our hands for the people. And, we meet the people in a courtyard, they're having tea, beautiful, wonderful hospitality. And they look at this image and this photograph and they said, well, the house, no, that doesn't look familiar, but there's this person in the picture. They look like so-and-so. So they wind up getting into our car. We drive to a house. I'm anticipating and excited about this. And all of a sudden, the person looks at this picture, the one at the house, and he said, no, this isn't the right house. But I think it's so-and-so. And we drive to another house. And next thing you know, people look at the picture and they're like, no, this isn't it. And they said, you know what? If he left in 1905, maybe he's from the old part of the village. So then, they would direct us to the old part of the village where the houses were, older and the community's older. All I can tell you is Jandoli, beautiful people, wrong village. We did this about 5 different times. We went to so many, different houses. We gave away all our sweets because every time we stopped at someone's house, we were like, here you go, thank you. And the people in Jandoli, which was really beautiful, when we got back to the courtyard where we started, and they were anticipating we found our village, and I said, no, we didn't. And they said, that's okay. Why don't you just come back tomorrow, have a meal with us and become part of our family? And I thought, wow, that's so beautiful. I went back to our hotel. I phoned my father and I said, look, I tried, but it's just didn't work out. And he said, you know what? That's okay. You've done more than what anyone else has. But you know what? Just go and enjoy India. The next day, my driver came back and my wife thought we were going shopping. But to her dismay, I said, no, I want to just drive to Garshankar, the town. Let's just talk to people. And finally, there was a gentleman at Garshankar who basically was like, oh, you're looking for Chadodi. And we're like, wait, did I hear you right? Chadodi. And he goes, yeah, it's about 6 miles up the road this way. So I was like, okay. But Emma, I'm still very guarded. I mean, here, you're just like, all I have is a photograph and that's it. So we come to an archway and there's this old man sitting there, 80, 90 years old. He looks at this image or this picture, no glasses, no nothing. And he said, well, there's a guy in the back. He looks like so-and-so. I mean, I look at this picture. I can't even make out the guy's face. And I'm like, oh, no. Okay. Anyways, he says, but I think the house is up this way. So he gets in our vehicle, we drive to a house, and as we, are typical, people come out and they, look at this picture. Well, this one woman sees this picture and she goes, wait, this is me in the picture. Who are you? I was like, wait, did I hear this correctly? This is you in the picture? And she was like, yeah, this is me. But who are you? And when I explained who I was, she immediately grasped me and she started to weep. And yeah, I teared up as well because it was like I found my grandfather's house. And the easiest way for me to describe who I had met. So my grandfather had an older brother. My grandfather's older brother, this was his daughter-in-law who I had just met. And, so immediate family. And, so I was able to find and recover and reconnect. My roots were literally just a thin thread. If the thread breaks, no one's ever going to find this village ever again. And I went with a purpose. I went in search of this village in the hopes of, doing something for my father, because he had never been to the village. He would never be going there anyways. And I went out into the fields. I pulled out these Ziploc bags from my pockets and I filled it up with dirt, and I brought the dirt home to my father and my relatives, and just to basically say, here's what I've been able to do, and that we've been able to reconnect with this family, our ancestral roots, which is now, firmly in place now. The thread never broke.
That's a beautiful story. And having Indian heritage myself from the north, from the Punjab, I can picture it now, and all the different villages, and and going from house to house, from banyan tree to banyan tree, trying to figure out who's who and where you all fit in. It's wonderful. I'm so pleased it had that happy ending. But I'd love to know, do you feel that it changed you in some way, or did it put some ghosts to rest for you? Did it do what you wanted it to do, the journey?
Yeah. Actually, the most interesting part is I went to India to look for my Indian background, and my idea was, wait, I was always Indian. whatever that may mean. Like, people may have an idea and an understanding of, well, this is what an Indian is, but no, I was always Indian. And I think that identity piece of Khichdi really sort of made sense to me. And the beautiful part about this is we're actually all Khichdi. We're all a blend of cultures and flavors. And I've had conversations with people saying it's great that you found it, but I will never find it. And for example, I had one person I was talking to, and he said, look, my family comes from Sicily, but we have no idea. I will never find, let alone the house, the village, I will never find the town, because there were no records. And I said, but here's the thing. Have you been to Sicily? And he said, oh yeah, no, I've been to Sicily. I said, okay. When you were in Sicily, was there something that connected you to this place? And he said, well, yeah, I mean, it felt like it connected me. And I said, well, you did the same thing I did. I just happened to go down a bit more of a deeper pathway to find my roots. Mm-hmm. But if you feel a connection, then you have a base that becomes yours. And I think that's the beautiful part. That's what changed for me, as well as the ability to share that with others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's lovely. Well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you put it into book form and you have shared it, and you continue to share it. So that's lovely. I really enjoyed hearing about that, your journey to the book about storytelling, and then your very own storytelling. But I know that another big part of what you do is you coach and you teach leadership.
Yeah.
And most of us would think, when we think about leadership, we think maybe of politics, or we think of big business, or we think of entrepreneurship and things like that. But as writers, whether we publish traditionally or whether we decide to go down the independent route, I feel quite strongly that, in fact, we are leaders of our own little businesses then. And I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about the importance of seeing ourselves as leaders in our writing and our writing careers. And if there's anything you could share with us that will inspire us to embrace that leadership and not be scared by it.
Well, and I mean, I've got some very strong thoughts on the subject of leadership, because having mentored and coached so many people, there are people who come to me saying, Sam, I want you to provide me the insights and things to become a leader. And I always say, well, see, I'm all about, when I mentor and I coach, I just ask questions. I'm what I call the difficult monk. I mean, you may come to me looking for the answers to life, and you're like, okay, I'll show up and he'll just tell me what I do, and then that's it. I always say I'm the difficult monk. I mean, they see me as an orange saffron robed, bearded man sitting on top of a mountain. Well, here in Vancouver, I do sit on top of a mountain. I do have a beard, but not an orange saffron robe. The difficult monk is the person who is not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, because what lies within you are the answers you seek. And that's, you're your own monk. But leadership is similar to that, because they come to me looking for this insight. They want to be a leader. I said, there's only one thing, and only one thing, that makes you into a leader. Emma, they lean forward, because I'm just about to give them this piece of insight that's just going to blossom into this thing called leadership. And then as they lean forward, I said, it's followers. You don't determine if you're a leader. They determine if you are worthy of that title. And, leadership is not a place to be. Leadership is not a status. Leadership is a lifestyle. And no matter who you are, you have the capacity to be a leader among the people who see you and who follow you. But followership is also an interesting word, because it has a stigma of blindly following. Followership is not that. Followership is someone who believes in who you are, endorses and supports you, and is willing to be present with you. That's a follower. Yes, there are those who are just blindly following sheep and whatnot, which is fine. There are different types of followers. But when it comes to writing, to becoming an author, you are a leader, but you have to respect your followers, because they're the ones that will determine if you are worthy of that title. I mean, there are people who do see me as a leader, but equally, there are those who likely don't see me as a leader for any number of reasons. And I'm not out there to gain, from this standpoint of leadership, but I just roll up my sleeve. I mean, one of the things in my life that I'm not willing to compromise, there are 5 things that guide and direct me: servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, and community do-gooder. That first one, servant leadership. You know what? I know something needs to be fixed. I roll up my sleeve. I don't care who gets the credit. I don't care if it's messy or dirty. It needs to be done.
Mhm.
And that's the type of leadership that I embody, is this active leadership. And the rest of the things that I shared with you support and endorse who I am. So for an author's perspective, just do what is right to you, and people will follow you. Not everyone, but people will follow you, and they will deem you to be a leader. And you could be writing about a particular subject, or you could be writing about, like I said, my own memoir, and there's realizations in it. Well, the idea though is that you are an expert. When you put your thoughts on paper, you become an expert. Don't hold yourself back saying, well, no, but I don't have my PhD in this subject. No. If you're willing to share what's important to you, and there are people who will listen to you, to them, you become an expert. I mean, the first book on storytelling, I mean, I never did a PhD, master's, or anything related to storytelling. I'm a self-taught storyteller. And people said, well, you tell these beautiful stories, but how can I tell stories? And when I put it into a book, it makes me an expert storyteller, but not where I go around saying, yes, I have the exclusive secrets to storytelling. No, it's just, here's what's worked for me. Let me share this with you. And for your listeners who are writers, never hold back, because your magnificence is in the writing that you do. And Emma, you never know what's going to happen. So the way I also describe it at the end of my first TEDx speech was, we have the capacity to change the world, but in a different way than what people think. Because if you try to change the world through your eyes, it's complicated, it's difficult, it's ever so, far reaching that you can't do it, and you get disappointed. Instead, either as a volunteer, as a community activator, as a writer, if somebody reads your work and they now have a different perspective of life because of something you've done, and they now view the world differently, you've actually changed the world. So don't change the world through your eyes, change the world through the eyes of the people that you work with or you support. Because once they see the world in a different way because of your presence, you've changed the world. Now, you don't want to change them into your view of what the world should be. That's up to them. But that's how we change the world, by changing the world through the eyes of the people we support and help. And that's through their writing as well.
Oh, that's lovely, because it's just giving people an opportunity, isn't it, to see things from a possible different way, and then they get to, and that, I think that's applicable to fiction as well as to non-fiction.
Totally.
The reason we write fictional stories is to give empathy to our characters, for people to see life through somebody else's experience. And so just by offering that, then we can give them that chance to see how others live and how it could broaden our own way of being as well. Do you find that, and I'll hold my hand up here, I experienced this in being in having my own community here online. There's elements of leadership that are very scary, and it feels like a quite a big responsibility. Do you have that experience with the people that you mentor and tutor, or do they come to you, all of them, come on, bring it on?
They come to me, bring it on. And the reason being is because you've created a presence. And one of the things that I often share with people are, not what you do, but let's figure out who you are. Only by understanding who you are do we lay a foundation down that enables us to then realize what we will want to do. In other words, we do it the other way around. We go through, let's say, uni, we do a course we really like, and, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I think I want to pursue this further. And, let's say you do a finance course, you like it, it resonates, and you do really well. You do more finance courses, then you do a internship or co-op in a bank, and you get your first job in the bank as a teller or customer service rep. And then slowly you work your way through the banking system. And 25 years later, maybe you hold a senior position as a, commercial banking person. Well, is that the right field that you should have been in? It's what you did, and that's how we describe ourselves. But what I try to do is I peel that away and I said, but tell me who you are. Let's forget the job for a moment. What are 5 things you're not willing to compromise in life and career? So it's got to be both. And that's where I gave you my 5 of servant leadership, story sharing, activator, igniter, champion, enabler, and community do-gooder. And the reason I say this is important is it lays down this foundation, because 8 years ago, I wasn't a writer, but when that emerged in my palette, it hit all 5. So I said, well, I have to do this. And that's how I embarked on this journey, because, and it resonated because it was that strong, because I'm not willing to compromise those 5 things. For your listeners, and my second TEDx was about how to find those 5 things. So, that's the other one where if you wanted to learn more about how do you realize who you are, which helps you on the journey of what you want to do, that's my second TEDx. And maybe, who knows, maybe that's my next book. About how to activate the voice within and not listen to the noise around you. So we'll have to see. But that's, I think, one of the most critical parts, because as an author, we start writing, but do we know why we're writing? And do we know what activates us? But when you find those 5 things that you're not willing to compromise, it lays that foundation to say, here's what I have to do because it's that important to me. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't want to take the writing and try to fit it into the 5. You want to take the 5 and then see if the writing fits it.
That fits in so well, actually, with one of the things that I work on with my students is, why this book, why you're writing this particular book? Because often we think, well, it's just a story idea that came to me and I just think it'd be a really good story. But for that idea to stick and keep you up at night and plague you and you can't think about anything else, there's often a reason deep in our soul that why we're called to write that particular book. So that's really interesting that those ideas of leadership and who you are actually fit really nicely with why are you writing this novel, why are you writing this book. That's so interesting. So should our writers embrace that feeling of leadership and readership as well? Because one of the things I think that when we're at those beginning stages and we think my life will just be amazing when I finish this book and everything will change. And then there's that very real fear that, oh my goodness, now someone's going to read it and what if they don't like it? That's quite a different thing. Should we worry about things like that, or do we stand confidently in who we are and say, if you don't like the book, that's okay, but here it is anyway?
Yeah, no, to your latter point, definitely. You're writing for yourself. And as a result, someone may have a perspective that's different, and that's okay. But I would say majority of the people will embrace and appreciate what you've done. And so I would say that from a standpoint, like just do this and go forward. For example, in my first TEDx speech, some random guy who I don't even know made a comment, and it's still there: worst TED Talk ever. Stop talking about yourself and stop reading your notes. But Emma, well, no, and that's the part that just, for me, I feel sorry for him. It's like, why are you this type of person that just wants to slam somebody? But if you look at my TEDx speech, well, I had one cue card with 3 bullet points, but I'm not reading any notes. I'm talking to the audience, which I always do. And it's on personal storytelling. So shouldn't I be sharing my stories? And, so just the fact that someone takes that effort to do that, yes, it's a barb and it does sting. And it unfortunately mars this lovely experience. But equally at the same time, I'm so glad. I've had about getting close to 6,000 views on that TEDx speech, and who knows? Maybe there's one person who didn't like it. Maybe there's more than that. Who knows? But equally at the same time, I'm more concerned about am I putting something out there that will support somebody? If it's one person that says, you know what, this has really helped me to activate that voice within so that I can be a writer, I don't care about the person who said it's the worst TED Talk ever. He doesn't even factor into this. So I think it's about building that resiliency for yourself and that confidence to say, I'm going to put it out there. And you know what? It doesn't matter who's going to read this. And I leave it to the interpretation of the individual. And, and the writing journey itself has, different parts to it. And, I applaud anybody who just, says, you know what, I'm going to do this. And then they commit to it and they put it out there. And when that book arrives, and this feeling, it's an amazing feeling when you finally hold that book in your hand. Yeah.
Oh, well, Sam, I think that is a beautiful place to sort of round off our conversation today with that real note of positivity. You alluded to a moment ago that you may be thinking about writing a new book. Does that mean that you aren't writing at the moment, or are you writing something that you're willing to tell us about?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've got about 185 blog posts, so I do continually still write. And all of those are accessible to anyone to read. But no, I'm contemplating. It's not a matter of if I'm going to write. No, I will be writing. And the thing I will share, though, is the book Lost and Found, Seeking the Past and Finding Myself, which is my book about my journey to India. It's my magnum opus, Emma. I mean, there will never be anything better than this. However, that's not to say that I'm putting poor quality out after it. But no, my heart and soul was poured into that book, which now I'm working on a screenplay. So maybe there's a movie. Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
so
exciting.
In fact, I'm talking to my screenplay writer later today. We just finished the final draft of it. And that's an interesting thing for your listeners as well, from an author's perspective. When you write your book, and if you do pursue the screenplay part, Emma, it's tough for an author because the screenplay is a visual representation of your book. The literary one flows beautifully, but it doesn't flow beautifully from a visual sense. And when I got the first draft, I was like, but the story's changed. And I had to just pull myself back. And, the essence of the story is there, the details, but the whole visual aspect is totally different. And as a writer, you're like, okay, it's not that it's butchered, but I know that it has to be done differently. So anybody in your listenership who's interested in even pursuing a screenplay, know that it's tough for us authors in that regard as well.
That's funny. It's not that it's been butchered, but
exactly.
Well, Sam, where can our listeners find out more about you and your books online? Yeah,
so I mean, your listeners are more than welcome to go into my website, which is www.sam-thiara, thiara.com. And again, that's where a lot of my blog posts and then the books are listed there. I'm on Amazon and any of the major sites, you can find the book there. Equally, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. So there's different ways to find me.
Cool. Well, I'll be sure to link to those in the show notes. That's wonderful, Sam. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. And I want to leave your listeners with this quote that I live by, which I think is so important. Everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. We are all living stories, and there's a need for us to share who we are. So go out and showcase your magnificence to people around the world.
Lovely. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.